Have you ever heard the sound Poe 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 echoing through empty fields at dusk? In Japan, that's not just background noise, it's a warning that something ancient and impossibly tall might be moving nearby. Hashaku Sama, the 8-foot-tall woman, is more than a shadow in rural folklore. Born on a Japanese message board, her story quickly escaped the screen and found its way into real villages, unsettling those who heard even a whisper of her presence. Many claim they've never seen her, but swear the fear is real, especially when night falls and the fields go quiet. If you've ever heard unexplained sounds after dark, share your experience below. The fear surrounding Hashaku Sama didn't start in the fields, though. It began with a single post that set off a wave of unease across Japan. On 2 Channel, Japan's sprawling anonymous message board, a new kind of ghost story began to take shape. In the early days of 2 Channel, among countless rumors and confessions, a post appeared that would set the tone for a modern urban legend. The story was simple but unsettling. A boy visiting his grandparents in a rural village found himself stalked by a woman who stood at least 2 meters tall. She wore a wide-brimmed hat that cast her face in shadow and a white dress that never seemed to move in the wind. The most chilling detail was the sound she made. Poe, 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 echoing through the fields, always just out of sight but never out of mind. The original post described how this towering woman would appear near children, watching from a distance. Relatives in the story warned the boy to stay inside, hinting that those who caught her attention rarely escaped unharmed. The tension in the account was immediate, a sense of being watched, a growing dread every time the strange sound drifted closer, and the feeling that leaving the village was the only way to survive. It was a story that felt both personal and universal, rooted in a specific place, but speaking to anyone who'd ever felt vulnerable in an unfamiliar setting. What set Hashaku Sama apart from older yokai tales was how ordinary she seemed at first glance. No animal features, no twisted limbs, just a human shape stretched to unnatural proportions. Her presence didn't fit the mold of faceless spirits or wandering ghosts from traditional folklore. Instead, it was her height, her silence, and the way she hovered at the edge of a child's vision that made her so disturbing. The legend's simplicity made it easy to remember and even easier to imagine in the quiet of rural Japan. As more stories appeared, the legend began to move beyond the internet. People started to talk about her offline, especially in small towns where the fields grew thick and the roads were empty at night. Parents began to warn their children about the 8-foot woman, even if they'd never seen her themselves. The sound, once just a detail in a single post, became a kind of warning. It was enough to make people pause before stepping outside after dark. The story's spread was rapid and uneven. Some said they knew someone who'd seen her. Others insisted the legend was just a way to keep kids close to home. But as the summer months arrived, a season when ghost stories feel closest, Hashaku Sama's reputation grew. She became a symbol of the unknown, of isolation, and of the dangers that might be waiting just beyond the reach of streetlights. But if there's one thing that stands out in every variation of her story, it's who she chooses to follow. Again and again, the reports focus on children, those who are most vulnerable and those most likely to hear that ominous sound drifting through the night. Why she hunts. Children, vulnerability, and the Poe, Poe, Poe omen. The question that lingers in every retelling isn't just what Hashaku Sama is, but why she seems to focus on the youngest and most defenseless. Her presence in the legend is always tied to a sense of exposure. Children outside at dusk, the quiet between houses, the moment when adults are just out of reach. The stories describe a gradual escalation, a strange sound in the air, a fleeting glimpse of a white dress, and then the creeping certainty that something is watching. The po, po, po is the first sign, and it marks a shift from ordinary life to a situation where safety is no longer guaranteed. In these accounts, the children rarely understand the danger at first. They notice the sound, sometimes so faint it could be mistaken for wind, but it becomes more persistent with each passing night. The sightings are brief, just a tall figure at the edge of a field or behind a tree. The fear grows slowly, settling in as the sound draws nearer, until the feeling of being watched becomes impossible to ignore. Within days, the sense of unease moves from the open fields into the home itself. Children become withdrawn, stop eating, and sometimes vanish, leaving families searching for explanations that never come. This focus on children is not unique to Hashaku Sama. Japanese folklore is filled with stories meant to keep the young close to home. Like the kappa by rivers or witches in the mountains, Hashaku Sama reinforces warnings to keep kids close in rural Japan. These tales reflect a collective anxiety about what happens when the most vulnerable wander too far from the group, especially in places where help might be far away. Folklore experts note the legend taps into age-old anxieties about keeping children safe in isolated areas, where the unknown feels closer and the consequences of danger are more severe. The auditory warning, "Po, po, po," is a detail that sets Hashaku Sama apart. Japanese ghost stories often use sound as a supernatural signal. Footsteps, rustling fabric, or sudden silence can all mean something is near. But this particular sound is distinct. It's repetitive, mechanical, and impossible to mistake for anything natural. The stories agree that if you hear it, you should leave immediately, no matter how familiar the surroundings might seem. That simple phrase becomes a kind of code, a reminder that the threat can appear anywhere, even in places that should be safe. Variations in the legend exist from region to region. Some describe Hashaku Sama as appearing only in the humid days of summer, when the air distorts sound and vision. Others link her to specific landmarks, old trees, forgotten shrines, or crossroads at the edge of town. While the details shift, the underlying fear remains. No one knows where she might show up next, but everyone knows what her presence means. Families sometimes try to protect their children with rituals. One of the most common is placing a circle of salt around the house or the child's room, a practice rooted in folk belief that salt can ward off evil. Anecdotal accounts suggest that even today, some rural households still use this method when stories of Hashaku Sama circulate. Yet the legend often insists that such measures are never enough. Hashaku Sama is said to adapt, finding her way inside despite every precaution, leaving families with a sense of helplessness that lingers long after the threat seems to pass. The heart of the horror lies in this feeling, that no matter how hard you try, you can't always protect those who need it most. It's a fear that goes beyond the story itself and settles into everyday life, shaping the way people think about safety and risk. As we look closer at the features that make Hashaku Sama unforgettable, one detail stands out above all: her unnatural height. This is where the legend moves from cautionary tale to something uniquely disturbing, and where her shadow begins to stretch across both old folklore and modern anxieties. The towering figure, folklore roots and unsettling realities. Standing out in every account, Hashaku Sama's height is the detail that no one forgets. 8 feet tall, taller than any normal person, towering above doorways, sometimes stooping beneath trees or brushing the top of a room as she enters. Her size is more than just a physical trait. It's a sign that she doesn't belong in the world as we know it. We're used to certain shapes and boundaries in the human form, and when something exceeds those limits, it sets off a quiet alarm. Even for those who doubt the supernatural, the image of someone that impossibly tall, silent, and watching is hard to shake. In Japanese folklore, unusual height or distorted features often mark a being as something other than human. It isn't just about being big. It's about being wrong, unsettling in a way that feels instinctive. Folklore studies show that any distortion of the human form, be it an elongated neck like the Rokurokubi or superhuman height like Hashaku Sama, triggers a primal alarm. The further a yokai drifts from familiar proportions, the more it unsettles those who hear the stories. This is why tales of stretching, bending, or oversized figures are so common in Japanese ghost stories. Other legendary creatures rely on different kinds of physical distortion to create fear. The Nopperabo, for example, has no face at all, while the Tenome's eyes are in the palms of its hands. These unnatural features, whether it's height, a blank face, or misplaced eyes, signal that the entity is not just strange but dangerous. Hashaku Sama's height, however, has a particular effect. She stands out immediately, impossible to overlook. In a small community, news of someone seeing a figure that tall would spread quickly, and her image would become a fixture in local warnings and whispered conversations. Equally important is where she appears. Hashaku Sama is rarely seen in the heart of a busy town. Instead, she's nearly always reported in places that exist between worlds. Empty fields at dusk, narrow paths bordered by tall grass, old shrines just outside the reach of daily life. Many border zones, tunnels, deserted paths, old shrine grounds are classic settings for Japanese yokai encounters. These liminal spaces, neither fully wild nor entirely safe, amplify the sense of unease. They're places where the ordinary rules don't always apply, and where the supernatural feels closer than usual. The timing of her appearances adds another layer of tension. Most sightings happen at dusk, when light fades and it's hard to tell what might be moving in the distance. The isolation of these settings means that those who encounter her are usually alone, making the threat feel personal and immediate. As rural areas grow quieter and old ways vanish, stories about the 8-foot woman become reminders of what can be lost when people leave. Echoes of anxiety about emptiness, abandonment, and the unknown. Hashaku Sama's legend sits at the edge of both geography and imagination. She stands in the spaces where certainty gives way to possibility, and her story lingers in the minds of those who hear it. The fear she inspires is not just about her presence, but about what she represents. The unsettling idea that danger can appear anywhere, especially where we feel most alone. This is how her legend endures, adapting to new fears while holding on to its core, a warning that some boundaries should not be crossed, and some figures are best left unseen. Hashaku Sama isn't just a story for campfire scares. She's a living echo of Japan's oldest fears, showing what can happen in the quiet places where safety meets the unknown. Over the years, her tale has evolved from ancient yokai warnings into a modern horror born online. Yet it still speaks to the unease of what lurks beyond familiar borders. If this story chilled you, hit like and subscribe for more unsettling cases from Japan's shadows. Would you dare step into a rice field at dusk if you thought she might be watching? Share your thoughts in the comments below.